Well, let's look at what he can do. It's an old Bill Walsh adage about when you're scouting players. He used to tell his scouts, don't tell me what they can't do. Tell me what the players can do, and I'll figure out if they can, if I can get something out of them that can fit what I'm trying to do with this team. We know Tebow can run the ball. So if you're doing the read option or you're doing any running plays out of that system, we know he can run the ball. I don't think anybody ever questions that. So we know that. He also has done very well in a metric I have called bad decision rate. He actually led the league 1 year in this, or actually he was second in the league in 1 year in this. Bad decision rate measures how often you make a mental error that leads to a turnover or opportunity for the other team. You're forcing passes into coverage or misreading coverages. Tebow, at least, if he's not, he may not, people say he's not very good at reading defenses and such. Well, that's fine. He might not be great at reading defenses, but he certainly won't make mistakes if he can't read the defense. He's not going to force the pass into coverage. He'll throw it away. He'll run. He'll do something else. So he's already doing two of the things that we know Chip Kelly wants to do out of an offense. We know he can run the football. We know he's not going to turn the ball over. So that's two major pluses. So already, there's two things he can do right there. So that's a good base to build on if you're talking a number 4 quarterback.
A lot of people just look at him, the 40% completion, obviously he does it not very accurate, all of those things, and just say this guy can't play. If the right offense was built for his skill set, can that offense succeed in the NFL?
Yeah, I've always thought it could for a couple reasons. One, he's also worked on his footwork. That's one thing it was an issue of his back in the day, and I guess he's been working very, very diligently to get his footwork repaired, and it's said that his footwork is much better. So we don't know this, but can imagine that maybe Chip Kelly probably knows something and the rest of us don't as far as that goes. But can you build an offense around him? Sure, and that's the thing. The thing about the Eagles' offense is it's kind of it's this new offense, but still in a lot of ways a throwback to we're going to lean heavily on the running game. I've always thought that Tebow could be sort of today's. I'm really going to bring up a throwback name. A guy named Joe Kapp back in the late '60s. He led the Minnesota Vikings to the Super Bowl, and Kapp was kind of the same kind of guy. He can't throw the ball very accurately. He can run the ball and things, but he's very much a leader and he could get his team to rally around him. And a lot of what Tebow was doing with the Broncos during that playoff run seemed to be similar to what Joe Kapp did back in the day, and Kapp led his team to the Super Bowl. So I'm looking at that going, well, it's not the system. This is not the type of setup that's perfect for a team, but you know what? It can work under certain circumstances. And so from that standpoint, I say, yeah, you can build an offense that can make it work for him.
It's I know you're a WWE guy there, Casey. It's like Paul Heyman would say, accentuate the positives.
Exactly. If the lighting's not good, then don't talk about the lighting. Exactly. And in this case, hey, he can run the ball, he can throw the ball. And I think about it this way, too. The Raiders used to have a thing about quarterbacks. They said they wanted a dominant starting quarterback. They wanted a strong veteran backup, so if the starter got hurt, somebody you can put in there and you could win with. Their third-string quarterback, what they wanted out of him was a young guy that they could develop in their system. They didn't expect that they were going to have to lean on their third-string quarterback to come in and win games, but, okay, this is a guy that we can develop in our system. You look at Tim Tebow and say, well, if he's getting his footwork repaired, we know he can already do a bunch of other things. And I love people on Twitter saying he has no talent. I'm like, this guy won the Heisman Trophy. He has some talent. It's just can you get it to translate to the NFL? So I just look at that and say he's a perfect fit for what you want out of a third quarterback if he's got some of his footwork issues repaired, and if you can develop and build on what he has, he's perfect for this role.
Well, and Casey, that's one of the things I mentioned. Look, if in the scenario that Bradford and Sanchez got hurt in the Week 17 game and you had to go into the playoffs, who do you want playing for you, Tebow or Matt Barkley?
Tebow's already won one. We know that. So he's already in a playoff game. Exactly. I mean, it's Barkley's not. We're talking. It's people have Tebow's a very he's a guy who's going to get a lot of reaction on people. But look, this is your third string quarterback. This is not a guy you're probably going to have to lean on in any respect. And he's done it before. Barkley hasn't done a thing before in the pros. And as far as running this offense, yes, I would want Tim Tebow if he can build on what he's already done. And we know, if you can get out of him what his talents would say you could get out of him, you could. And I ask this too: if Tim Tebow had played for Chip Kelly at Oregon, or if he had been available to play for Kelly Oregon, do you think Kelly would have been successful at Oregon with him? I think he would have.
Well,
and if that's
Yeah, and that's a question I was going to ask you. If Tim Tebow runs Chip Kelly's offense, the one that we've seen the last couple of years. Now, some people would say, look, Chip Kelly wants to run the ball more. I guess having a quarterback like Tebow would have to force him to run the ball more. But can Tebow succeed in the NFL in this offense, but certainly not other offenses?
I wouldn't necessarily put him in other offenses. You'd have to really scale back what you're going to do. This offense, I'll put it this way, this offense is one that can, to use that Paul Heyman phrase, can accentuate what he does to a very large extent. In other words, other offense, you're trying to make him a drop-back quarterback. No, it's not going to work. But you're going to put him in this system, because one of the things about Chip Kelly's system is they're going to run the ball. If they're successful, they're going to run the ball so well that the other team is going to be forced to do one-on-one coverage situations. Okay, now you're saying Tebow is going to be thrown against one-on-one situations. You're not saying, okay, he's going to have to read, going to have to read some cover 2 defense to figure out where to put the ball. You're going to put him in a situation where, hey, you've got a one-on-one situation. We're going to give you some big receivers that have a large catch radius, so you got to, you don't have to be as accurate as you would be in some other systems with smaller receivers. There's a lot of positives that you can accentuate in the system, and somebody mentioned on Twitter as well. Actually, I heard saw a couple mention on Twitter. What happens if you're trying to use him for the NFL's new 2-point conversion system? If the NFL decides they want to change the 2-point rules, they want to get rid of the point after altogether. Okay, well, do you want to? If you're sitting at the 1-yard line and you're trying to go for a 1-point play, or you're sitting there going for a 2-point play, you want Bradford, and you might want to say run the football or run a run-pass option. You want to put Bradford down there? Maybe get him hit. If you're trying to run a quarterback sneak, you want to put Bradford in there? Or do you want to say, well, I've got Tebow. I can at least use him for that package too. Why not?
You look at this at all and wonder, though, or worry that you're looking at some sort of – I hate when these teams talk about putting certain packages in for players. We're going to put the Wildcat package in, or you're going to run the short yardage package or stuff like that. Can that kind of situation work in the NFL?
It can. It's one of those things where if you've got a guy like Tebow in there, if he's just a guy you're going to be using for trick plays, it sounds great, but maybe you're going to get 10 or 15 plays out of him. But I think Chip Kelly's the sort of guy who would put together those sorts of packages. I think he's the kind of guy who could be successful in incorporating something of that extent, to where, okay, I'm going to put this guy on 4th down. He's going to be willing to go against the grain. And I think with a lot of teams, it's like, oh yeah, we'll bring this guy in, we'll make, we'll do something special for him and things. It's like when the Bears used to try and do things with Devin Hester. We'll make a receiver out of him. We'll put some packages together. And it's like, oh wow, you ran a bubble screen. Okay, that was really creative, guys. They didn't end up doing anything with him because he couldn't do that much more than what he'd already done for them in the passing game. But I think with Tebow, there are things you can do from in specific packages that would fit a Chip Kelly offense better. And I don't think Kelly would, if he brought him in, I don't think he'd say, look, we're going to build a package and not do it. I think Chip Kelly would say, we're going to find a way to actually do something with this. So I think in this case should be an exception.
We're talking with Casey Joyner here, ESPN.com, NFL Insider. He's at Casey Joyner TFS on Twitter. And you had tweeted out, Casey, that you're on board with the Eagles signing Tebow. Lots of reasons to like this move. You mentioned a few of them. The one that I think is very interesting is the bad decision rate that he excelled in, that he does not turn the ball over. And I said, look, he accounted for 29 touchdowns and only 9 interceptions. When you add his rushing touchdowns in, it seems that he has shown that he will take care of the ball and that you can be successful with him. What are, though, some of the big problems that you could see in this offense, even in Chip Kelly's offense with him, that he still would need to improve on?
Okay, if you're going to be in a situation where, and we saw this last year, where, okay, hey, the Eagles are in a situation where they can't run Kelly's system, because Kelly's system it's designed to get a lead and then play from ahead, so you can always keep leading on the running game. You don't want to be a drop, want to have to pass the ball a lot out of the Chip Kelly system if you can avoid it. So if you're in a situation where it's like, hey, you've got to really throw the ball a lot, something happened and you can't run the ball, or game situation, you're down 14-0, late second quarter, and now you're really starting to have to throw the football. I don't want Tebow in an offense where it's, I've got to call 10 straight passes. That's just not what he's going to be able to do well, at least based on what we've seen in the past, unless, they can change that. But that's definitely something I don't want to do. And his accuracy, if you did put him in a situation where, if you get him in a one-on-one situation with tall receivers, a big catch radiuses, yeah, he can do a lot of things well. But even in college, it was his passes were, they weren't exactly things of beauty. They weren't Joe Kapp a wounded duck sometimes, and that so his accuracy can be an issue, and he's not a guy who I want to have him sitting back there throwing a lot of passes, and not only that, he can run very well. But I don't know if he can. I think he can scramble some, but I don't think this is a guy who's really going to be a big time scrambling quarterback. I think you have to call designed runs for him. So I don't think that's as much of an edge for him as it might seem, given his skill set.
Yeah, I'll ask you this question too, because I was looking at his college numbers. He completed almost 67% of his passes while he was at Florida. That number has dropped significantly in the NFL. Why is that?
Because he's having to throw more passes, and he's having to throw passes in other situations. At Florida, they would ask him to throw certain types of passes, and he didn't have to throw vertical quite as often. And I think in the NFL, you're going to have to throw vertical a little more often. Although I think one of the things that in college too is that he has having to throw more vertical more often than the pros, but also in the college they would lean more on the short passing game. And I think in the pros, when the system he was in, I don't think they ask him to throw a lot of short passes, because that's where you're going to really spike your completion percentage. You're going to, if you're going to be throwing a lot of short passes, you're going to be able to complete, say, 70% of those. That's what's going to raise your percentages up when you throw out other passes. So I just think NFL teams, so we're just not going to have you throw it as often, so we're only asking them to make the difficult throws, and letting them make the easy throws.
Right, and wouldn't that, though, be what Chip Kelly would virtually be asking him to not be a guy to, I know last year he took a lot of shots down the field with Nick Foles, but it seems that he has wanted to get away from that, and he wants to be more of a short, intermediate passing offense.
Yep, that's the thing. They want to do, hey, we're gonna transit, we're gonna have a running game in place, we're gonna actually run the ball, we're gonna have a passing game that has a lot of run style plays, we're gonna do bubble screens, we're gonna do little screens on the outside and transition. Some of those plays are they're passing plays technically, but really they're just long handoffs. So you're gonna do a lot of that. So they'd like to still do that, and then say when you do have you throw vertical, because the thing Kelly wants out of his vertical game is doesn't want to have to do it that often. He does it. He wants a really good completion percentage. He does not want turnovers. Chip Kelly will not stand for turnovers. It's one of the reasons he's making these major changes. He got some. There were some things that the passing offense, looked good at last year. It actually did well if you look at the numbers, but they're a terrible and bad decision by both Eagles quarterbacks, and he just won't deal with that. He knows with Tebow, if nothing else, okay, maybe he's not going to be quite so accurate, but I know the ball's not going to go into the other team's hands.
Is he, when you look at this offense that he's ran in Philadelphia the last couple of years, how similar, or is it exactly the same to the Oregon offense, or is it a modified version?
It's a lot the same. I think he's having to lean. Teams have been able to make him lean on the pass more often. And the thing is, with his Oregon teams, it wasn't just what he did on offense. It's what he was able to do on offense that put his defense in a position to do the things he wanted to do on defense. Because I think that's where a lot of the changes have happened. Because at Oregon on defense, they would have the lead so often, he could just tell his defense, okay, we're going to rotate players in on defense, because they would have a group of like 15 players who rotated. They would rotate in safeties. They would rotate in linebackers. It wasn't just like rotating defensive linemen. They had an entire rotation for their whole defense. And they were able to say, we're going to pass rush, and we're going to go for interceptions. That was their big thing. We're going to get turnovers on defense, and we're going to just pin our ears back and go after the quarterback. Yeah, teams might be able to run the football, but you know what? They're going to have to run fast-paced offenses. They're not going to run the ball that often, and we can just concentrate on one area of the game. And the NFL, he hasn't been able to do that on defense anywhere near as much. So I think that's where the bigger change is that on defense he hasn't been able to do what he wants to do.
I guess in the end, though, Casey, you got Sam Bradford here, you got Mark Sanchez here, and there could be a new quarterback on draft day here. I guess the chances of Tebow actually making the team are probably only 50-50 at best, right?
Yeah, well, it's like somebody said on Twitter. I saw where somebody said, the Eagles don't really have a number one quarterback, which is not quite true. But the way they were saying it is, they don't have a number one quarterback. Why should they bring another quarterback in? I'm like, well, that's exactly the reason you bring another quarterback in. If you're not sure about one of your quarterbacks, or you have some uncertainty, bring another guy in. And I keep thinking too. Again, Al Davis used to say about first-round picks, people would ask him, you pick up some first-round pick that some other team would drop. They'd be like, wow, what are you doing that for? And he'd be like, you do understand that somebody at one point thought this guy was really talented, and so much to the extent that they invested a first-round pick. Same thing with Tebow. Somebody invested a first-round pick in him once. He did a fantastic job in college, and if you can get him anywhere near what he did in college, and he's your third-string quarterback, boy, that would be great. I think if you're looking at just from a pure football perspective and all the other stuff that comes with Tebow, if you take that out of the equation, this is a no-brainer move. There's no reason not to make this move.
Well, we'll see what's next. He was at the practices today, the off-season workouts, we should say, where Evan Mathis was not at the off-season workouts today. We'll keep an eye on that as well. Casey Joyner, ESPN.com, NFL Insider, joins us here on Twitter at Casey Joyner, TFS, and I would anticipate plenty more thoughts on this Tebow stuff as this day and this week of him practicing moves on. Casey, always a pleasure, man.
Appreciate it, man.